Once again, my name is Stephen Flanders, and this is episode 7 of 15 Minutes to Save America. We're going to talk about fascism this time. Now, quick review. First dysfunction that really hit this country, besides racism, which I will get to eventually, was the telegraph, which enabled the rich to take control of the media, which enabled corporate personhood to get established. Nobody noticed it, but it ended up infecting the culture, making it to where people lost confidence in our ability to govern ourselves in our local and state communities, which led to the increase in federal power, which led to the collapse of the Great Depression, which instead of learning their lessons, the wealthy in the form of Franklin Roosevelt doubled down and established what amounts to fascism, which brings up fascism. It's a hard term to define, and the definition of it has really kind of shaped the issue. In the last 60 years, I've been looking for a definition. First thing I heard was, fascism is the writing of perfect laws, enforcing them totally, and by that, perfecting humanity. I've heard it defined as racist, militaristic, nationalistic, and that always left out the part about the collectivism. And the whole fascistic thing is the collective bundling of all these reeds together and making a strong weapon out of that. And so that's even where the name comes from. It implies collectivism, and fascism always had this kind of national socialistic tinge to it. A number of years ago, I finally stumbled upon a friend introduced me to George Seldes and the biography about him, not the book, but the video. I believe it's a PBS video called Witness to a Century. George Seldes uttered the definition that I've been using ever since, which is fascism is the alliance of big money with big government against the masses, against the poor, the working, and the entrepreneurial classes. In addition, fascism uses modern science in the form of psychological techniques using the media and education to mold the masses into super people. And that's exactly what Mussolini had in mind. Mussolini started and defined fascism to begin with. He had been a Marxist, but he thought more progress could be made using national structure than having world Marxism. He posited a system where the state just controls the major means of production, leaving the smaller economic enterprises to do their own business, but at the same time maintaining totalitarian social controls on the people. Well, fairly soon, it became obvious that the government was not going to be able to control the big corporations, and instead it got to where the big corporate interests started having control of the government. And that's, really where it ends up. Kind of, other than the psychological molding of the people, fascism is really just the rebirth of the traditional despotic character that has always arisen in countries, with the big central forces of business combining with the big central forces of government. Okay. In the U.S., under FDR, after his machinations in the 1930s, got us off of constitutional control by essentially repealing the 10th Amendment. We have since then been a party of big government control versus the party of big money. We experience a kind of ratcheting fascism and have done so all of my life, and I'm 73. The Dems will come up, when the Republicans are in charge and seemingly giving the store away to the forces of greed and big business, the Democrats come along and say, vote for us and we'll stop the big business. We vote for them. They don't roll big business back much at all, but instead start putting more and more government regulation on the people. Okay, in the guise of social programs, which don't ever really solve problems, because why would they want to solve problems? Because that keeps them keeps us voting for them. But the Democrats impose more and more regulations on people. And 4, 8, 12 years later, the Republicans can't come along and say, vote for us and we'll get government regulation off your back. We vote them in. They don't get government off our back. Instead, they start giving more and more power to the corporations. They deregulate the corporations, but it doesn't really take the regulations off the little people. Okay? And then we go back and do the same thing. This is what happened in the transition from Eisenhower to Kennedy, from Johnson to Nixon in 1968, from Ford to Carter in 1976, from Carter to Reagan in 1980, from Bush the first to Clinton in 1992, from Clinton to Bush the two in 2000, from Bush 2 to Obama in 2008, from Obama to Trump in 2016, from Trump to Biden in 2020, and from Biden back to Trump in 2024. It's been the same promise. And at each time, there's a ratcheting of power, either big business taking more power or big government taking more power. But that centralized force of big government and big business together continues to garner more and more power over the lives of the American people. It is real world fascism in action. We have basically a fascist oligarchy, which threatens to become a worldwide fascist oligarchy. The same dynamic is in action all over the world. Now, the other thing, with this definition of fascism in hand, we can see that all the other isms, from Marxism to socialism to Nazism to FDRism, are all just schools of fascism. They're all just combining big money power with big government to control the people. Some people might say, oh, no, Marxism, we want to end capitalism. You can't end capitalism. It is stupid to even consider it. Think about it. Capitalism, in its purest form, it just means saving the proceeds from one project and using some of that to finance or supply the next project. A farmer saving back seed corn to be able to plant next year's crop is capitalism in its most basic form. Even in the old Soviet Union, if they were going to build a project like a hydroelectric dam, which is going to benefit a lot of people, right? Supply power and water to a lot of people, relieve flooding, provide for irrigation, all this, right? Even if they use slave labor, you're still going to have to feed the people, clothe the people, house the people, provide them with tools, and provide them with materials for many years to build this project. In order to do that, you're going to have a whole bunch of money of one form or another laid aside to build this thing. So just as G.K. Chesterton said, socialism and communism don't get rid of capitalism. They are just state capitalism. So then you can see that communism just becomes a school of fascism. The big government's already in place. State capitalism means the money is already controlled by the government, so government and big money are tied together already. All they have to do is turn on the people, which they always do, and you basically have fascism in action again. And that's really where we are. That's, what I have to say about fascism. I'll turn this off and go through a review again, and there's a special surprise coming up. Thanks for watching. Oh, be sure and share this and follow.
Once again, my blog site is lifeinafascistcountry.blogspot.com. The first link in a series of links that present pretty much everything that's on this video series is lifeinafascistcountry.blogspot.com /2025 /02 / how and why to save America. This whole thing I just did on fascism and quite a bit more on it is contained in, once again, lifeinafascistcountry.blogspot.com 2013 / 2013 /04 / a-definition.html. And all these letters are lowercase when you're putting that address in. Now, here's the surprise. This is something original from me, which is my symbol for American fascism. I think it's pretty nice. It's got the hammer and sickle combined with the dollar sign. You got the left face of fascism, which is big government, who is more than happy to make common cause with big business if that's what it takes to get control of the people. And you got the right wing of fascism, which is big business, which is more than happy to make common cause with big government if that's what it takes to keep them in power and making more money than God. So that's American fascism right there in a nutshell. Feel free to spread that if you care to. To once again review where we've been up till now. Telegraph, invented in 1844, led to the press being controlled by the wealthy, led to corporate personhood, and we explored what could be done instead of that and how good it could be, which, because of the common people losing confidence in local and state government, led to the 16th, 17th, 18th, and 19th Amendments, all of which should be thrown out except for the 19th Amendment, which gave women the vote. And even more importantly, really, it brought about the idea that government should be done by experts and us little people should just be passive recipients, which is such an un-American, anti-Republican attitude. It's amazing how people put up with that, back then even. But once again, the media didn't let them know that that was what was being thought and why it was such a bad idea. Everybody goes, well, I guess so. I sure don't know what to do. 1933, FDR basically ran a fascistic coup. And this time we learned quite a bit about what fascism means and how it continues to come into our present day and why it's such a threat. Next, we'll be looking at Social Security and socialism and their detrimental cultural effects. 1947, the First Amendment, which is, going to be a little controversial, how it got twisted out of all recognition, and the loss of local community moral self-government, and how that has affected us, and the reverse of, the lost blessings of liberty, and how much the blessings of liberty could and did mean to us, and why that was framed a better government than any the world has ever seen. And the governments you might name that seem to be as good, like the Norwegians, they copied a whole bunch of our stuff. And good on them for doing so, but we ought to copy our own stuff. And then we'll get into reform and refounding and that open media thing. I'm going to go into a little bit here just because there's a little extra time. A true public forum is really a standalone idea. Yes, it is how we could affect this revolution, and I will be talking about that. That is what it is, but it's a peaceful revolution. But the idea of a true public forum stands alone, even if it wouldn't be the best way to affect this revolution. It would be revolutionary in and of itself, and it's something we ought to be doing by itself, let alone in conjunction with the rest of this agenda. Once again, thanks for listening, and be sure and share these. Sharing is so much more important than following, in my opinion. The American people are really missing a bet here. All these things that if you kind of like them, share them. Depend on other people to share them. Don't just share them if you think other people might approve of you for doing so. Share them if you like them, if they make sense to you. Be a leader. Be your own leader. We got to quit relying on influencers and people we have approved to lead us, and we will only share things if they say something. If they're polished and presented it professionally, high production values, start getting real. Anyway, I'll talk to y'all later.